race for governor in New Jersey is still too close to call incumbent Governor Phil Murphy in a dead heat with Republican challenger Jack Ciattarelli. In Virginia, also Republican Glenn Youngkin is the projected winner after defeating former Democratic Governor Terry McAuliffe. We're joined now by our panel. We have GOP strategist Matt Gorman and Democrat strategist Spencer Critchley. He is a former Obama campaign communications advisor and author of Patriot of Two Nations. Welcome to both of you. I want to start with you first, Spencer. We've been talking about this for quite a while. Is this a wake-up call for Democrats, and how is this going to change the strategy moving into 2022?
I think it certainly should be, and I'm frankly a little bit worried that Democrats might take the wrong lessons from this. I often say Democrats are really good at policy and not very good at all at politics. And I also say that your enemy is not your enemy is your teacher. And Republicans keep giving Democrats free lessons in how to do politics without making everything about the details of policy. And Democrats seem not to be learning that lesson. That's not true of all of them. We've had great exceptions like Barack Obama, Bill Clinton. I think actually Joe Biden is very strong in this area. He leads from both the head and the heart. But in general, Democrats tend to be stuck in their heads, and they just want to argue over should we be farther left, more to the middle, this detail, that detail, and that's not the lesson to take from this.
And Spencer, the McAuliffe campaign brought in quite a few very well-known Democrats to campaign for them. Why wasn't that enough?
I think I heard Leslie say earlier that it's seldom enough, and I think that's a really good point. Just because somebody is famous and well-liked does not necessarily mean that the glow transfers from them to another candidate. Sure, you know, you'll generate press coverage and all that sort of thing, but I'm not sure it really can be proven to make a big difference to voters. Voters need to feel like they have what at least feels like an authentic emotional connection with the candidate. They really are not keeping track of the policy details. They're not keeping track of which famous people endorse them or don't endorse them. What they really want to know is that you deeply care about them and that you are a strong leader who will fight for them. That's really the message you need to get across.
And Matt, on that note, you talk about big names. You know, throughout the campaign, it really seemed like Glenn Youngkin was trying to distance himself from Donald Trump. And even when Donald Trump held a rally for him, he kind of backed off and didn't really want any part of that. Was that a good move on his part?
Well, look, let's be clear. Glenn Youngkin had no surrogates coming to the state of Virginia. He had said multiple times he was a Virginian, campaigning with Virginians for Virginia. You know, Terry McAuliffe brought in Stacey Abrams, Barack Obama, all these hosts of people that weren't actually from the Commonwealth. And I think to the broader point, Terry McAuliffe wanted to nationalize this race. He wanted his opponent to be Donald Trump. The reason we're sitting here with Governor-elect Youngkin today is because he spoke of those kitchen table issues, economy, crime, education, that voters in Virginia actually voted and cared about.
And, you know, Matt, he actually said in his acceptance speech tonight that on day one, he wants to start transforming education and he said restoring excellence in schools, you know, hiring teachers and special education. I mean, he's really wanting to focus on the education issue, which is what seems to have really put him over the edge in this election with all those suburban moms.
It absolutely has. And that has been a consistent theme he's been hitting on since he started this campaign. We've seen this issue bubble up. We saw it in Loudoun County with the school board, with parents really voicing their concerns. It later bubbled up in Virginia Beach. And what are two of the areas that really were pivotal for Youngkin tonight? Both of those places. And I think it's really indicative of his strategy, and he's been consistent from day one, really never wavered off those messages.
And, you know, Youngkin also talked about cutting taxes, you know, putting more money in people's pockets. Now, that is a really huge issue, and I'm sure that's something that other Republican candidates and other races moving forward are probably going to latch on to as well. Wouldn't you say?
I would. And look, you know, you could say, oh, you know, suspend the gas tax doesn't really, you know, take too much away out of into people's pockets, or the grocery tax, but it adds up. And I think it makes you looking proactive and looking for solutions to help lower the price of everyday goods. Right now, we have Joe Biden claiming gas will probably be above 3 gallons until mid-next year. It looks like he's reacting, where Youngkin looks proactive, and that's a key for Republicans going forward.
And back to you again, Spencer. What do you think Democrats are doing as far as changing pace, changing their strategy? Are they going to focus more on the issues that really seem to matter, that put these candidates over the edge in these races that, most people thought would end up going to the Democrats and did not?
Yeah, Democrats are already actually very strong on the issues, not just the soundness of those issues, but actually the polling of those issues. A disturbing pattern that has shown up repeatedly over the years is that Americans, generally speaking, really like Democratic policy positions. They're just not so sure they like Democrats. And that gets to the heart of what I'm saying here is the issues are important, but it's not really the issues that moves voters. It's the way those issues feel. So a Democrat hearing, talk about the impact of taxes would be tempted to get into a debate of who those taxes really affect and whether they end up yielding a higher return on investment, et cetera, et cetera. And that's kind of missing the point. Taxes just feel like money is being taken away from me, and I don't like that. And you need to communicate with people in a way that gives the feeling that you care about what they care about, and you don't give them that feeling by debating the details of these things.
And, all of these issues we're talking about, these things that mean so much to people, all those school board meetings we saw with these passionate parents and, people want to pay, they want to have more money in their pockets. All of these things seem to really resonate. And you've got other races, even right there in Virginia. You've got Winsome Sears, who's set to be the first black female lieutenant governor in that state's history. She's a former Marine. People just seem to relate to her, kind of like Youngkin. They felt, that she was talking directly to them.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And, you mentioned all the anger at school board meetings around the country, and that's another really good case in point. If we respond to all the upset about critical race theory by arguing with people about what critical race theory actually means and whether there's race baiting behind this and, whether we should just have an accurate curriculum on the history of race in this country, all of that loses the connection over the emotion here, which is people are worried about what critical race theory sounds like to them, what it's been made to feel like to them. And you need to connect with them more on the level of, listen, no Americans are in favor of unfairness. We all just want everybody to have a fair deal. So whenever we're talking about race, we're really just talking about all Americans being equal and everybody having a fair shot. And when we're talking about history, we're just talking about the actual history of this great country, which includes the enormous progress we've made. But if you respond by debating what critical race theory is, you kind of accept the proposition that it's something that needs to be very carefully analyzed because it's kind of worrisome.
Do you think, Spencer, that this is going to, get some Democrats to move further away from the right, seeing what has happened in these shock elections?
I think it's a mistake to think that the lesson from this election, or really most elections, is that you should move, away from the right and more towards the left, or vice versa. This is really not. That very debate within the Democratic Party is a symptom of the problem I'm most worried about. Because, one of the things that Trump has shown us and other leaders has shown us, you can look at Trump's policies and some of them were pretty far left wing. I mean, he had these tariffs and then he was redistributing wealth to farmers who were impacted by those tariffs. And then other ones were pretty far to the right, and other ones you couldn't really make sense if they were left or right. They were just sort of populist or just some kind of performance of a policy. And, his supporters didn't punish him for that because one of his strengths is that he connects with people emotionally and he at least appears like he cares about them and he at least appears like he's fighting for them. I would argue that he doesn't and he isn't, but he's convincing. And he's convincing on the level of emotional authenticity. So the more I see Democrats arguing about how, the whole lesson to take away is we needed to appeal to the Democratic base more, or the whole lesson we need to take away is we need to appeal to moderates more, makes me worry because I think they're just continuing to really miss the point. You can have a wide range of policy positions as long as voters feel like you actually get them, you actually care about them, and you're going to fight for them.
And that is absolutely the key, Spencer. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you, Matt.